decreases the pressure. This is Boyle's law. Which basically says, look, if you take fixed volume of a gas and you expand that volume, so volume V1 to V2 goes up, then the pressure of that gas will go down. They stay the same. It's an inverse relationship. And that is the relationship you need to have in mind when we breathe. So you've got a thorax here. In that thorax, you've got a couple of lungs sitting in here. And there's a pipe connecting to the outside there. You get the idea what we're going for here?
Yep.
So what we want to do is we want to use muscles to expand the pleural cavity. Of course, the pleural cavity are in the thorax, but we expand the thorax, we expand the pleural cavity. So the main muscle that we use
Diaphragm.
is the diaphragm. The diaphragm, when relaxed, is domed up. So we can say that it's elevated. That's the relaxed state for the diaphragm. So if we contract the diaphragm, it flattens out. Pretty straightforward? Now, does the contraction of the diaphragm expand the volume? Does it increase the volume? There's my thorax, the floor of the thoracic cavity is the diaphragm. When I contract the diaphragm, I lower that floor, does it make the volume go up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
When the volume goes up, the pressure goes down. This floor drops. It makes this chamber bigger. When that chamber gets bigger, it means the pressure in there drops. The pressure is now below room air. So out here in the atmosphere, if we set this 760 millimeters of mercury pressure we experience out here, if we calibrate that to 0, and then we decrease the pressure inside our chest, what we call the intrapleural pressure, okay? And then the pressure in the lungs, which we call our intrapulmonary pressure, if we decrease that, it's going to be negative compared to room air. Not much, it's only going to go down about -1, but it's still lower than room air, so air is going to flow in. So when we do that, we inhale. And air comes into the lungs. So you contract the diaphragm, you breathe in. It's that simple. That's the only muscle you need to be able to do what's called quiet breathing. When you take a 500 milliliter breath in, you're sitting there breathing at the table, you breathe in, that's it, diaphragm. Now you have supporting muscles in the top of the chest and the side of the chest that help stabilize the thorax, but they don't actually have to contract for this quiet breathing. Now that's different when we want to do labored breathing. So, quiet breathing. For inhalation. Diaphragm. Okay? Now, that's opposed to what we call labored breathing, or forced respiration. So there, we're going to have to use the muscles that are between the ribs. We've got ribs out here. And some of the muscles between the ribs external intercostal muscles. When they contract, they move the ribs laterally and up. So when these muscles contract, the ribs come out and up. They call that the bucket handle. They go out like that. Okay? That's going to increase the thorax. It's going to increase the thorax's volume. We have some muscles that attach to the top of the rib cage too. So up here we have the SCM, sternocleidomastoid muscle. We also have the scalenes. And over here, we have the pectoralis minor. Okay. When all of those contract, they lift the ribs up and away. Okay. So now you're lifting the chest up and this way, and you're dropping the floor, and you're pulling the ribs out. All of those are going to expand the thorax. Following that? Okay, so when every one of these contract, the SCM, the scalenes, pectoralis minor, external intercostals, and the diaphragm, that's going to give you your maximal increase to the thoracic volume, which is going to give you your maximal decrease to the thoracic pressure. So it's going to give you your maximum or your most sustained inhalation. So, you can feel that. Right? With students, I'd say 80% of students, no matter how many times I talk about this, they do this backwards. They say we suck air into our chest and it expands our chest. That's completely backwards. That's not what we do. Okay? What we do is we use muscles to expand the chest, drop the pressure, and then air flows in because of that pressure gradient. Do you see there's a difference? Okay? The other one would be, say, taking a pump and blowing air into our chest like it was a balloon and inflating it. That's called positive pressure. We don't do that. Okay? We use muscles to create a volume change, to secondarily create a pressure change. The pressure in our thorax is now lower or negative compared to room air. That's why it's called negative pressure breathing, and air flows in. That musculature doesn't work, you asphyxiate. You have to be able to move the muscles to be able to change the pressure. Also, if you're in a room and the pressure in the room drops, you will also asphyxiate because you can't create low enough pressure in your lungs to overcome the low pressure in the room. If you've ever been, maybe we've all experienced rolling down the window a little bit in a car when it's going down the highway at 50, 60 miles an hour or something like that. And the air rushing by the outside of that window is very noisy, so we know it's a turbulent flow. But also, air or fluid rushing at a high velocity has a low pressure. It's called Bernoulli's principle. So when you do that, you try to catch your breath out of that window or whatever. It's hard to get a breath because the air is flowing at a high speed and it's at a low pressure. But you have a harder time creating that pressure gradient. Same thing as if you happen to be unfortunate enough to be in a hurricane or a tornado. Okay? People that are in an area like that and the tornado passes over them, they say, I couldn't get my breath. And the reason they couldn't get their breath was because that air moving around at 700 miles an hour is at extremely low pressure. And they can't get the gradient to exist, so they actually can pass out because of that. Okay, so you got to know the muscle involved in quiet breathing and the muscles involved in labored or forced breathing. These are for inhalation. Let's talk about exhalation. So when we exhale, when we do quiet exhalation, all we have to do here is relax the diaphragm. So it's a passive process. You just let the diaphragm relax. The rib cage is elastic, so it'll kind of pull back in because of its elasticity. Plus, you have a lot of abdominal organs down here in the abdomen, and they're pushing on that diaphragm. So when I contract the diaphragm, I squish the abdominal contents. The intra-abdominal pressure is going to force that diaphragm back up when I relax it. So due to the elasticity of the rib cage and the intra-abdominal pressure, the diaphragm elevates again, and I breathe out. So if you just relax, out comes some air. Now that's your tidal volume. It's only 500 mils, but that's quiet breathing. Now, I can expel more air than that, right? I can blow out more. You can feel that there's muscles involved when you do that. So that's forced exhalation. So forced exhalation, all of the muscles we listed over here have to relax. That's a foregone conclusion. Those all have to relax. We're going to contract the internal intercostals. And also our abdominal muscles. So rectus abdominis, abdominal oblique, and transverse abdominis. Okay. So those are the muscles that are all down here. The oblique muscles are out there. The rectus abdominis is here. And the transverse abdominis is down there. Okay. They all flatten the abdomen, and they all insert on the inferior ribs. So when you contract those, it flattens the ribs. The internal intercostal muscles run in the opposite direction of the external intercostals. So when they contract, they bring the ribs down and in. Okay? So internal intercostals, abdominal muscles, they flatten the rib cage, decrease the volume, increase the pressure, air flows out. Any questions? So the goal now is, on those torsos, to identify the muscles, and on the test, here are the types of questions you're going to get asked. Okay, first of all, identify the respiratory muscle. So diaphragm, intercostals, abdominals, any of those. We did that in AMP1, so this is just review what we did there. 2, you're going to get asked, does this increase or decrease thoracic or pleural volume? Okay. Then you're going to get asked, does it increase or decrease intrapulmonary pressure? And then finally, you're going to get asked, does it aid in inhalation or exhalation? I'm going to be checking to see, do you understand the correlation between those 3 events? Is that clear? Okay, so I want you to spend some time doing that now. Okay? Practice that a little bit right now. And then when we have about 15 minutes to go, so 11:45, we're going to talk about respirometry. And we'll talk about how to do that as well.